Senator Bill Cassidy, thank you for joining us. How you been?
I'm good, Robert. How you doing, man?
Let's start with the Obamacare replacement and all that went along with having that original bill on the House side pulled. What can you tell us about why that didn't get, why it never even made it for a vote? What do you know about that we might not?
President Trump ran for office saying that he wanted to make sure that everybody had insurance, to take care of those people with pre-existing conditions, no mandates, and lower premiums. I think that bill failed because there was a report, an evaluation of it, that said it would increase the number of people uninsured, it would make it harder for people with pre-existing conditions, and it would raise premiums relative to Obamacare by 10 to 20%. Now, if candidate Trump ran, pledging to folks he would accomplish certain things, but the bill doesn't accomplish it, it just is not going to go very far, and I think that's what you saw happen.
So you, from what you just said the last couple of seconds, I get the sense you weren't fond of that either.
I think candidate Trump ran pledging, promising certain things. And you don't start off your presidency by on something as major as that, doing something different. Because there's a lot of folks who depend upon the president to, the candidate to kind of reflect in his policy what he said on the campaign trail. So I think it's better that we live up to candidate Trump's pledges.
It's interesting because we had Mike Johnson on a couple of times, Congressman Johnson, and he had made the point that at one point in sort of that last 4 or 5 days of negotiations, that Speaker Ryan said to him, in an attempt to get his vote, to get his backing, that Speaker Ryan had said to him, now we know it's not the best bill. How does that happen? Why wasn't it the best bill? Why would Speaker Ryan attempt to bring to the floor something that he knew, by his own admission, wasn't the best stuff?
Well, the old saying that if you like sausage or if you like laws, you don't want to see either one of them being made. So I think that the trade-offs that Speaker Ryan was having to make, the trade-offs he was having to make in order to get certain people's votes, kind of detracted from the quality of the bill. And I think that goes back, Robert, why it failed. Ultimately, people didn't like all the trade-offs. Now, that said, the problem with Obamacare is that we still have people paying, literally being charged $39,000 for a couple, 60 and 61, $39,000 for their insurance. Friends of mine, that's their quote. No one believes me, so I put it on my Facebook page. And so when folks are having to pay the equivalent of the cost of a new car or a mortgage for a pretty nice house a year for health insurance, it's not sustainable. So in all this, we still have to address the problems of Obamacare. But again, I think we have to go back to what candidate Trump said, and lower premiums as well as take care of all the other conditions.
So meanwhile, you on the Senate side had co-authored another Obamacare replacement bill. Is that still in the works? Is it still on the table? And how does it vary from the House bill that never even got off the launch pad?
Ultimately, if we're going to pass legislation that affects so many people, it's going to be better if it's bipartisan. I wish it was exactly my vision. I actually don't, but that said, it's not going to happen that way, and it shouldn't happen that way. Because in our country, the only way that legislation that affects everybody passes and endures without being fought over continuously is if both parties support it. So what we do with our bill, we say, listen, Washington, D.C. isn't smart enough to figure out what to do in Louisiana, Alaska, California, Florida, and Hawaii, and every other state. Let's give it back to the states. So in our bill, we just say, listen, we in Washington are going to ask you and your state capital to figure out how to provide insurance for the people in your state. We're going to give you some guidelines. We're going to give you some money. You can't use the money to build a ballpark or a road or to balance your budget. It has to be used for health care. But within these guidelines, you can do what you want. Now, I like that because if a blue state like California wants to do something different than a red state like Louisiana, probably it works better for California, but let them live with it and let us live with it. And we will come up with ideas that work. Now, I like that as well because instead of somebody having to go to Washington, D.C., to say to somebody, my policy is $39,000 a year, what do we do about it? They can find Mike Johnson on the street and say, Mike, look at this. Can't we do better? Now, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say Mike because Mike is your congressman. It would be your local state official. It would be your legislator down here. I just think it's better to give it back to the states. Give it back to the individual. Don't put it in Washington, D.C., and that's what our plan does.
How else does your bill deregulate the morass of laws and rules?
We give it back to the states. We say, listen, at a minimum, everybody in the state who's eligible should have a pre-funded health savings account, which means the money is put into the account to pay for things like an urgent care visit for your daughter's earache. You have a high-deductible health care plan. You have a pharmacy benefit. State, you cannot change that. You cannot lard that up. But if somebody wants more than that policy, they can put their own money in. Their employer can put money in. However you want to do that, then you can start putting your state mandates.
What's the status? What's the status of that right now? What kind of shots you got?
I'm not sure my bill passes, but the bill that does pass will end up looking like my bill. Because I don't think there's any other way to get to candidate Trump's pledges unless it's a bill that looks like, I say my bill. I have 5 other co-sponsors, and it's called Cassidy Collins. Susan Collins helps me, the woman from Maine. We help each other. It's not going to be necessarily our bill, but it's going to look like our bill.